Are you the friend who's always being asked for health advice? Now imagine turning that passion into a fulfilling career with our Become a Nutrition Coach program. Step into a world where your enthusiasm for wellness becomes the heart of your own thriving business. With me as your professor and guide and coach on our user-friendly digital platform, you can learn from anywhere at your very own pace. It's perfect for your busy life. Envision empowering others to live their healthiest lives, all while growing a career you love. You're not just gaining a certification here, you're joining a community of like-minded professionals ready to support and celebrate with you every step of the way. So what are you waiting for? It's time to nourish your future and help change lives, including your own. Head over to nutritiouslife.com/BNC for a free class and a sneak peek of the program. Your journey to becoming a nutrition coach begins now. Welcome back. I'm your host, Keri Glassman. Today we're chatting with Paola Telfer, a pioneer in neurotechnology. Paola introduced Sens.ai, a revolutionary app for neurofeedback and cognitive enhancement designed to boost creativity, focus, and mindfulness. I think many, if not all of us, are looking to maintain our brain health. Whether you're looking to improve sleep or optimize brain function, this episode is packed with actionable insights. So let's dive into this conversation so you can start your journey to a healthier, sharper mind today. As always, please rate, review, and share. Okay, let's do this. Welcome to Living a Nutritious Life. I'm Keri Glassman, a celebrity registered dietitian nutritionist. Join me every Tuesday on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms as I bring in some heavy hitters to share the latest in nutrition and wellness science. We dive deep into food, sleep, stress, relationships, and so much more. Your weekly guide to a happier, healthier, more nutritious life. Hey, Paola, how are you today? Thank you so much for joining the Living a Nutritious Life podcast.
Hi, Keri. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you today. As I was reading all about your current business and your history, I was so intrigued with just your sort of vast sort of business experience, but also your training as an engineer, and then your personal experience, which actually I think led you to create the current product that you are working on now, Sens.ai. So let's just start with your background again, because it is interesting. So you're a trained engineer, correct?
Yeah, I studied electrical engineering, which I know still like to this day is novel for a woman. So people are still always asking me about that. And at the time, certainly I was like one of three women in my class. So I happened to be good at math and physics. My parents encouraged me that way. My dad was an electrical engineer. So then I just stuck to it. It was something I was good at that was hard for other people. And sometimes that's where you find your niche.
Right.
So I also did an MBA, went through the corporate world, started with technical things and moved towards more the sales side, business side of technology. And then eventually started entrepreneurship, had my first company, which I would say was very much what I was good at, less what I was passionate about. So it was a software startup in the industrial Internet of Things. And then I had a motor vehicle accident that you already alluded to.
Right.
And that changed my life because
how long ago was that? How long ago was that?
9 years ago.
Okay.
9 years ago. And it threw me for a loop because it affected my cognition. And it was something that I had tied my identity to so much.
Right.
And I had brain fog. I also had a concussion and PTSD. And I was running another company at the time. So I, like a lot of people, I'm sure listening to your podcast, I couldn't just stop. I felt so responsible and I was so driven. So I really ran myself into the ground, continuing to work, prioritizing that. Really, I should have stopped and I should have prioritized my health right away. But that helped me to come across different modalities of healing and different modalities of cognition enhancement. And that's where I came across neurotechnology and discovered that it was so powerful, yet so little known. Right. So it had been around for 50 years. There were studies, there were technical experts on it. and people were still doing it in these really remote clinics, and it just wasn't mainstream. And it made me wonder, why is this? Why hasn't, Samsung, Google, Apple, picked this up when it's having such profound effects on so many people?
So are you talking about biofeedback when you're talking about that, neurotechnology?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So when I think about neurotechnology, and this is part of the education to the public, there's a lot of exciting things happening in the space, and you might even hear about Neuralink, and that's implantables. So it can get quite confusing. When I think about neurotechnology in the wellness space, I try and simplify it into 3 buckets, and the buckets we use are boost, train, and assess.
Boost, train, and assess. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And so boost is neural stimulation. So we're creating a temporary effect, very much like a glass of wine, a cup of coffee, these sorts of things. Where training that you mentioned already, like biofeedback, this is where we're teaching you how to shift into those states. We're creating trait changes. We're changing you, very much like meditation would change you. And then assessments are what we consider assessments are when we're testing the efficacy. That means, like, was it really impactful on someone's life? This brain training, this neurofeedback, this whatever stimulation. Have we made a change that is measurable in terms of brain function? And so that's very different than monitoring. Right. So we think about monitoring like with an Oura ring, with Whoop, right? We're looking at HRV and tracking exercise and that, where what we're talking about is a 15-minute dedicated session where we're testing your brain function. And we might do that once a month, once every couple months.
And comparing it to the function previous.
Okay. Precisely.
Okay. So that's really interesting. And I'm glad you explained that when you think of neurotechnology as those 3 buckets. I think that's really helpful. I want to go back to 2 things you said. One, I want to go back to what you were saying before you started doing biofeedback. And it sounds like you did biofeedback because you were, or what you said, neurotechnology, you found neurotechnology. It sounds like you found it because you were committed to getting back to your old self, to having that cognition that you had before your accident, to continuing to thrive and live optimally and not be held back by this accident. So it sounds like you were doing all of the things. So what were some of the things that you were doing that you didn't feel were as helpful as the neurotechnology? And maybe some of the things like that were helpful, but not as helpful, and you kept going further. Like, I'm just curious, like, what your journey was to get you to neurotechnology.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, definitely all the physical therapies. I did acupuncture and physiotherapy, and massage, of course. And what I found was that my body couldn't take the healing. I had a startle response. So because my nervous system was so wired, I couldn't actually receive the healing. And so things wouldn't stick. And in fact, I would almost resist it, like muscle spasms, like I didn't want to be touched, even like a massage. So that's an extreme of like a nervous system being in hypervigilance. That's where I was caught. The other things were even psychological things. So talk therapy, I did like EMDR, which is another form of neurostimulation. I did like hypnotherapy as well. I just found these things didn't stick. And it wasn't creating that real change that I was looking for. And I couldn't snap out of that hypervigilance. And that was the pivotal thing I needed. That was what I absolutely needed, is to be able to not clench when my son would approach me. He was 6 years old at the time. Be able to get into a vehicle with somebody else driving, things that were really impeding my life.
And I'm sure also, like you said, just functioning at work and being able to feel sharp versus brain foggy, right?
I mean, the brain fog was so intense. I would still take calls that I was like, oh, I have to, you get into this work mode where you believe that you are the only one that can do this thing when you're running a company, right? And so I was like, I have to take this call. And I would lie like on the ground, ice on me for the pain. I would have taken, many, many notes so that I would remember my train of thought, because I was so foggy. But I knew I was trying to get this done, right?
Right.
So
And it just sounds so tiring too.
it is
You had to be
tiring.
mentally exhausted, like doing so much work just to do the things that used to come so natural to you.
Yes. And only getting the most basic done. And then really not being able to perform well as a mother, as a wife. And that was just really depressing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, like when you get into those depressive modes, you overeat, right?
Right.
You don't feel like exercising. You don't want to see
Right.
people. It
And
just
all of
changes
those
everything.
things, the exercise and the food, we know also are important for healing your brain. Right. So,
Exactly.
so did you incorporate, of course I have to ask, the dietitian in me
Yeah.
has to ask, did you do anything as far as your diet goes and healing for, your brain, like via foods? Like, was there a specific diet you were following or anything like that?
We tried quite a few different things.
Or
There was one
supplements?
diet. Yeah, there was certain diets, especially a lot of smoothies and like cold pressed juices.
Mm-hmm.
And now imagine I can't really do that because I had a neck problem and shoulder problem, and so I couldn't do that myself. So that was something that then my husband had to do in addition to everything else around the house, is
Right.
make all my cold pressed juices. So there were a
Right.
lot of different dietary things I tried for months on end, and definitely helpful. It was just about how do you sustain it, how do you
Right.
create a good habit
Right.
around it.
Right. And I'm sure all of those things helped to a certain extent, but it wasn't that you hadn't found that thing that was giving you that breakthrough, right? That was actually
Correct.
taking you to that next level. Okay. So then you got to the neurotechnology, and what was the first thing you tried? Like, where did you go? What did you experience?
I went to local places, like, so I'm in the west coast of Canada in the Vancouver area. So I went to places in Vancouver that were doing more traditional clinical neurofeedback. And I believe that helped with my concussion symptoms, but it wasn't a breakthrough. And it certainly didn't help with my hypervigilance. And again, I said I believe it helped because there was no real measurement. There was
Mm-hmm.
no, for the engineer in me, there was no before and after that was
Mm-hmm.
conclusive that I knew I was spending my time and money well. And then eventually I realized that there were some clinics that were very expensive, but very, very good. And that's where I had my transformation. And what
So
they
what
did
did they?
differently,
Okay.
mhm.
I was just going to ask you, what did they do
No, it's
differently?
good. That's good. And so one of the things they did differently is first you have, they combined the, one of my advisors, Jake Unkelman, would say the content in addition to the psychology, in addition to the brain part, right? So think of it as the hardware and the software. So
Mm-hmm.
the brain being the hardware, the psychology being the software, and so you're introducing thought patterns. So and so that's actually something that we've incorporated in Sensei as well, and we do that through meditation tracks. And in particular for me, the breakthrough had to be that I had trauma. I had
Mm-hmm.
trauma from the car accident, and I needed to release that trauma. And so to do that, I think it's much more common now that people understand that you have to work through the trauma. You
Mm-hmm.
can't keep suppressing it, and you can incorporate reliving the trauma in a very controlled way in a particular state of mind, which in our case we call introspection, but is called alpha theta. So it's a
Right.
very deep hypnagogic state where now you are in charge of rewiring that story. And you can do it in a very gentle way with forgiveness and with
Mm-hmm.
gratitude. And it's very powerful.
Okay, so because I want to get to what you're doing at Sensei too, but I want to just stick on
Yeah.
again where you had this transformation, because obviously this led to you. It was the impetus to develop Sensei and what you're
Yeah.
currently doing now. So you said the hardware and the software thing. So you said you'd worked in you'd done some biofeedback. It wasn't really taking you to that next level, especially the hypervigilance side of things. It wasn't helping with that. So you found other places to go to, and they worked because again they were sort of doing, like you said, the psychology of things, and then the brain work too. So sort of that or I guess like you said, the hardware and the software, right? The psychology
Yeah.
side, and then the biofeedback work. So let's talk a little bit about that for people that have no understanding of biofeedback. Like, what is actually happening? What does it
Right.
look like? Paint that picture for people that have no idea what you might be talking about. I think most people understand the
Yeah.
psychology side of it, but the biofeedback side, again, for people that might have never heard of it before.
Of course. Of course. And I think when we think about different mental states, Okay, so when I say we have different mental states that we can shift into, that can be somewhat novel or new information to people as well. So we think about, we are focused, and now there's a focus state, and in our world with brain waves, that would be considered a beta dominant state. So there's this type of brainwave band called beta.
Right.
Now, if you stay in that state for a really long period of time, and which is what we typically do when we're very driven, sort of, people at work, we can go into more of a burnout. Right. You want to have a balance of your brain waves and learn how to shift from that beta into something like it's more alpha dominant, and alpha dominant would be more relaxed. Right. That's where you want to be when you're with friends, with family. And frankly, when you're having conversations with people, even like your team at work, when you're getting things done, you want to be a little bit more relaxed, but still focused. So there's subtleties in these different brain states. So even when we think about meditative states, let's say we're going deeper below alpha into like alpha theta and alpha gamma and even just low alpha. These states are actually quite subtly different as well. And so when you're doing neurofeedback, we're reading the brain waves, we're looking at the ratio, the power, the timing, synchrony between these different parts of the brain and these different bands, the alpha, beta, gamma, theta. And then what we're assigning them is a sound. So let's say gamma is a flute. Okay, let's just bring it to life. Where maybe piano is the sound for alpha, and we're doing an alpha gamma neurofeedback. Let's keep it really simple. So now, whenever you are achieving that state, you're going to get more piano and more flute. And when you get distracted or you get sleepy, the piano and the flutes will die down. The volume will go lower. The frequency of their occurrence will diminish. And so that is very much like having a meditative teacher, let's say, next to you when you're trying to do a breathing meditation and you're trying to focus on your breath. And then every once in a while, the teacher might tap you and say, bring your attention back to your breath, right? So they're basing that on intuition. We're giving you real-time feedback based on your biosignals, and there's nothing between you and them. It's just fact.
Right.
So now you're feeling into the state.
Right. So for people, again, that have never seen this or experienced this at all, like you are actually hooked up to a machine that is actually reading your brain waves and tracking where you are between beta, theta, alpha, etc. Right?
That's right. And you're learning to feel into these states because the feedback is coming at you faster than the speed of thought. So if you start getting analytical with it, it's actually going to reduce the sounds. It's going to reduce the positive feedback. So really you're sitting there and you're thinking, I like the sounds of flutes. I like the sounds of piano. And then you're just willing it. And your brain knows what to do from there. That's the experience of it.
Okay. So you had this experience. You felt like, wow, this helped you recover, from your accident. It got you through that tough time. And then you said, I want to do something with this. Why isn't this mainstream? Let's take it. Let's make this happen. Let's make this more available to people. So you started that company, but actually I want to go back to one other thing I was going to talk about with meditation, or I guess we could incorporate, let's incorporate it into when you talk to us about Sensei. Because I wanted to go back to, because you mentioned something with the biofeedback and a similarity with meditation. And I wanted to bring up how meditation we know can actually change your brain. And I remember I talked about that even in one of my books I wrote in 2010. I talked about incorporating meditation into your diet for 8 weeks, for part of this 8-week plan, because after 8 weeks, you actually can change your hippocampus. Like you can change your brain simply from meditating, which I think is always kind of mind blowing to people that actually, that it is that powerful. So I'm just putting that out there so we can get into that a little further, wherever you want to incorporate that into the talk about Sensei, because I know it is part of what you do with Sensei, correct?
Yes, correct. So let's align meditation and that neurofeedback for a moment. So if you think about it, we're always training our brains. We're actually mostly responding from a lot of already programmed habits of mind. right? So a lot of our responses to life, to things, are actually happening very, very quickly, and almost like from a routine that we've already learned, right? Historically,
Right.
this works, this doesn't work. So there's feedback loops, and very much like, you touch a hot stove and you learn that hurts, I won't do that again, right? There's feedback loops. That's how we learn. So when you're meditating, you're actually learning new habits of mind. The reason you would sit and you would practice breathing meditation, which is incredibly simple, but actually really quite foundational, is because you're learning how to maintain your focus on something. It's that simple. And it's really important, actually, the breathing meditation as a staple. And so now most of our day, especially in modern day, is spent with notifications going off on our phones, and like a fear-based media cycle, and things trying to get our attention. All right. So we all know this. So this is training our brains. We're allowing this into our lives. If we don't have a routine for, this is when I when I look at emails, this is how my notification sounds, these are the ones I'm going to ignore. If we haven't taken control of that in our lives, it's just going off all the time. And our brain is always going off and being programmed to be distractible. And so what we're talking about here with whether it's neurofeedback or with meditation is training new habits of mind. And so the difference is that with neurofeedback, if you're doing it right. A lot of us, have trouble sitting and meditating, and you might sit for half an hour and you might think, I don't know if I was doing my list of things to do or if I was actually focused. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to give people data, and we're actually trying to help with with this real-time feedback straight from your biosignals, from your EEG and from your HRV.
Okay, so I track HRV. I'm super fascinated about that as well. So I want to talk about that too. So what type of changes are you hoping people are going to have, and what types of benefits are they going to reap from doing biofeedback, I guess, in general, like you did when you had your recovery, and based on what you're doing at Sensei? So maybe you want to just talk about what you're doing at Sensei first, and then you can answer that. Did you know that there is one phase of sleep that most people fail to get enough of? And this one phase of sleep is responsible for most of your body's daily rejuvenation, repair, energy, and controlling hunger, and even the hormones that affect our weight, and so much more. I'm talking about the deep sleep phase. And you probably know by now that sleep deep is a pillar of a nutritious life. So there you have it. It's for good reason. You probably also know that I'm a little sleep obsessed, not with sleeping a lot per se, rather with getting good quality sleep, because I've been a not so great sleeper most of my life. And when I sleep well, I feel like I can conquer the world. And when I don't, well, not so much. So why don't most people get enough of this one most important phase of sleep? A big reason is magnesium deficiency. Over 80% of the population is deficient in magnesium, and magnesium increases GABA, a neurotransmitter, which encourages relaxation on a cellular level, which is critical for sleep. Magnesium also plays a key role in regulating your body's stress response system. Those with magnesium deficiency usually have higher stress levels, which negatively impact sleep as well. Now, before you go out and buy a magnesium supplement, it's important to understand that most products out there only have 1 to 2 forms of magnesium, when the reality is your body needs all 7 forms of this essential sleep mineral. That's why I recommend Magnesium Breakthrough. I used to just take magnesium at night, but now I take it at night for relaxation and sleep, and in the morning for brain function and stress management. Magnesium Breakthrough contains all 7 forms of magnesium designed to help calm your mind and help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. The deep sleep benefits are really noticeable. I track my sleep. You may see me post this on Instagram, and I can tell you I see and feel the difference. For an exclusive offer, go to buyoptimizers.com/NL Keri and use promo code NL Keri for 10% off any order. I'll also put that in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure. So earlier we talked about 3 different buckets of neuro wellness technology. And so it was boost, temporary changes, training, biofeedback, where we're teaching you how to shift on your own, and then assessments, which tell us whether or not interventions are having a change in your life function. So there's a simulation that you do, which is a test. So Sensei is a stack that combines all three of those things, right? And it's actually the only one like that. So it's quite unique in that way. So when you talk about, how are we trying to create changes in people's lives, what we're measuring that life function. And the test is essentially a test. It's based on methodology that's referred to as event-related potentials, ERPs. But that terminology is less important than understanding that it is a task that you are doing. It's about 10 minutes long. There's a controller like this. You're pushing buttons. But while you're doing the task, we are actually looking at your brainwaves. So you would have this on your head.
Okay.
And then
so
these
for
electrodes.
Those of you that are just listening and not watching, it's like this looks like almost like a helmet, almost like a I guess headphones with a helmet attached to it with holes in the helmet, though. Big spaces in the helmet. That's right.
It's hard to make these look sexy, but they are essentially headphones with electronics in it.
Right.
And the important part is where the electrodes are placed.
Okay.
And then the other part is how good the electrode is detecting even the most subtle brain waves and how it can differentiate. So in this case, when we're talking about those assessments that are looking at a simulation of life, we are looking at the brain waves at 1 millisecond precision, right? Which is, a gold standard for ERPs. We're doing this in a way that's mobile. So we're trying to, and self-serve. Usually this would be done in a lab. It would take hours. It would be someone administering. And we're doing this regularly at home. Usually you would only do this in a clinical trial.
Okay. So someone buys that headset and then do they connect with you? Do they do it on their own? Like, how do they do the test?
Yeah, there's an app. So the whole thing is on an app. It's a gamified app. And the kinds of information you would get from that assessment would be related to how your brain processes new information. So it's a very interesting sort of topic. So this is, again, sub the speed of thinking. Right. So it's less than 400, 500 milliseconds. And in that time, you are picking up new information and you are deciding what is distraction? What am I taking in? And then when you decide what you're taking in, you're saying, what is it? That's called classification. It happens at around 100 milliseconds. Right. We're also looking at impulse control. So you're thinking, I want to hit the right or I want to hit the left. I'm not actually supposed to hit anything, but I can't control myself, right? There's impulse control. There's the speed of thinking, the speed of processing information, and there's reaction time. There's the actual time you push the button. But there's sub-processes there related to memory, and there's just a whole richness of information that we're able to collect and share and track over time. And this is the kind of thing that really informs, is your life changing? And so it's very, very quantified. But beyond that, when you ask the question, what are we hoping to achieve?
Right.
Yes, it is the umbrella of life function, but it is in the very practical categories of sleep, anxiety, focus, brain fog, and aging. So the aging brain, and the aging brain is very interesting to me, very important to me, and it's something that we tend to accept, right? We tend to accept that, mom's just getting a little forgetful and she forgot her keys or she forgot why she's upstairs again, right? But it doesn't have to be something that we accept.
Yeah, and that's something we spend so much time talking about that with my students in my Nutritious Life certification, and then also just in general, I talk about that with clients and friends all the time. Like, we don't have to accept that. We actually don't have to age the way we think we're supposed to. We can actually have not only a longer lifespan, but a longer health span, and we can feel good for longer. We can feel better than we did possibly in our 30s.
I think I feel better than I did 20 years ago, like definitely more competent, more capable and sharper. But I've done a lot of brain training. So, and before that, I meditated since I was a child. My parents put me into meditation retreats with them since I was 9.
Wow.
And I had tastes of these sort of deeper states. And I don't think that I really was able to do it so predictably and so precisely until I had the neurofeedback and the neurostimulation, which is why I was so excited about it. Because yes, we certainly want to help people with, all these blocks they have to their success and their dreams. But we mentioned sleep and anxiety and focus, so common now. But we really want to move people through, it's a gamified app, through the game from that me level to we to all. And so we being where we're talking about creativity and letting go of the past and mindfulness. And then the all level is where we start getting into really advanced meditative states. There's a lot of subtleties of mental states that we've encapsulated into the app with the various experts that we've been able to gather.
So who is this for? Like who would benefit the most from using this product?
Well, the thing is, everybody would benefit, but
right.
who it's for is people who are willing to put in the time. It's not a pill, right? So it's for people who are driven to improve their lives. So people who are committed to changing their diet, doing their exercise, right? And people who get a gym membership and go, right? So that's what we're looking for. We want people to actually use it. We don't want it to gather dust on the shelf. We're not trying to sell to people who are just going to, have another gadget on their shelf. So people who are going to use it, I would say fall into two camps. They're either having a difficult time because they're having trouble sleeping, but they identify as a peak performer, or anxiety or focus. And maybe they're trying to reduce, their dependence on pharmaceuticals, right? Or they're just people who want to up their game and every edge is important for them because they're so demanding on themselves. And they have a mission that they're trying to create something beautiful in the world.
What about people that have Alzheimer's, let's say, in their family or dementia and are looking to prevent that?
Prevention, absolutely. Yeah. So the long-term mission of Sens.ai is early detection and treatment of dementia. So we are, so I mentioned that we're doing boost, train, and assess. And so as we're gathering this data set, we are building and learning what protocols work and how well they work and improving how they work. And this is going to help us to do these long-term studies and get the FDA approval for that early detection and treatment of dementia. So we're publishing white papers all the time. And there should be one coming out in another week or two, give the team a little time, but almost ready, which is on mild cognitive impairment, early detection and treatment of. And how we can move these markers that I mentioned we're gathering with the assessments. So as an example, the P300, which is the processing speed of the brain, we can move that like 10%, right? Like there's some very significant markers that we're looking at that typically only decline with age, and we can show that we can reverse them.
Wow.
So and we're trying to do it in a way that's controlled as well, because sometimes like just having a headset at home and just putting it on is a bit of a placebo as well. So we're controlling for that based on people who are adhering to the protocol and basically people who are just wearing it sort of lackadaisically, like they put it on once a week and
so
really adhering.
I have a question about that. So if you have this and you're committed to doing it, whether it is because you want to prevent something like Alzheimer's and you're concerned about that, or like you said, you're having an issue like sleep or anxiety and you want to improve that, or you just want to be as sharp as you absolutely possibly can be, whatever reason. But let's say you're using it, how long and how often are you supposed to do this?
Yeah, we say 3 times a week, 15 minutes each time. And
so 45 minutes a week, you can reap these benefits.
Yeah. So it's very, very minor, like in terms of time, but it is dedicated time. So you have to, it's like some things are harder to create a habit around, and then you have to book it into your calendar, right? So it's one of those things.
Well, you're not going to multitask while you're doing this. This is definitely not something you can multitask with. So you can't do this while you're cooking. Wear your headset while you're cooking. No.
Exactly. You can't be walking around. You can't be scrolling social. It's difficult if you have young kids running around. So you do have to carve that time out for yourself.
Yeah, it's so fascinating though. I think again, just the whole conversation around health span and longevity, and we can live longer now and we want to live longer. And and many people have really high expectations of how long they want to live, but it's not just about getting those, it's not just about adding on years. It's about adding on good years. And if we're going to live longer, we want to be sharper. And part of that, like I'm just thinking about it. It's not only does it sound like this may be helpful with the cognition and focus and all of that, but also if it's even just helping with the sleep, like that in and of itself will have an indirect effect on your cognition. So
it does.
Because I just see so many people suffering with sleep as they get older, again, with shifts in hormones and having issues with sleep, and then adding in anxiety to that, and then waking up because of hormonal issues, and then there's anxiety, and then the sleep gets worse, and then you're brain foggy the next day, and it's just it's a vicious cycle. So I work with people all the time to try to like break that cycle. So anything like this, I think for people, especially people that are really struggling, or again, just want to do everything they can to maximize their optimal brain function. It's really, really fascinating how you've created this. So I have a question though, for people that might not, first of all, I guess, where can you get this for everybody that's thinking like, well, where do I get this? How do I do this? We're going to put all that information in the show notes, but you can share if you want to, that right now with people, because then I have a follow-up question to that.
It's available online. It's just Sens.ai. So SENS.ai.
Great.
And we deliver to 60 countries. Predominantly we're in the US.
Amazing. Okay. So for someone that says, I have a red light therapy, like I have a red light machine, and I have my Aura ring, and I have my this, and I'm not buying one more wellness gadget right now. What can they do at home to start to reap some benefits?
Yeah.
Like how can you reap these types of brain benefits? Because my first thought is doing meditation, right? But is there anything else people can do if they don't want to? To me, this sounds like something, again, you want to live optimally, like go for it. Do something like this. But if you don't want to do that, like what can someone start doing right this minute at home to sort of reap some of these types of benefits that you hope to get from using something like Sensei?
Well, if they're already doing like a red light therapy, then they're already sitting quietly for some time. Mm-hmm. So I would say the likelihood is that what are you stacking with that? So are you just scrolling? Like, are you just on social media while you're doing red light therapy? Are you doing something like that? Why not instead incorporate a breathing practice with that? So during that time, and then if you want to, you can incorporate a gratitude practice during that time, but something that's meditative and that's creating those mental habits, right? Something to counter the regular day, like bombardment of, notifications and distraction. Can you focus on something positive during that time? Mm-hmm. So that would be my general advice.
I love that.
And the breathing practice could be as simple as, like a 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. A little bit longer on the out is more for relaxation. So it's more of a calming for the nervous system. That's incredibly simple and easy to do. You can find free apps that do that.
I always tell people you're not going to be, you can't be stressed when you're breathing properly. So if you're breathing properly, your body's not going to be in a stress state, which is something.
They're so linked.
Right. Right. And we need to, if you're breathing properly, again, not just breathing, if you're breathing properly, you're going to and you're going to put your body into a better state. And even just in terms of, I always tell people to do that too, before they eat, so that their body is in a better place to digest and metabolize food too.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. I think too, people can incorporate, so if they have for me, the way I do the neurofeedback when I use this in the mornings, I do stack it. So I stack it with a Nano V. So there's do you know Nano V? It's basically, it's like at a cellular level, it's like a reducing the oxidative stress in the cells. And it's like oxygen goes up the nose. I'm not associated with that Nano V, but I like it. And I have one at home. And then the other thing is I sit on a PEMF mat, and I use the Beamer, also not associated, but that's just what I use at home. And so we've purposely made it so that it is stackable with things like that, because it is hard for people to find time.
Right.
Right. And that's why, and even within it, there's a stack. So, I would add, we talked a fair bit about neurofeedback, but we didn't talk much about, this neurostimulation. And so the neurostimulation that we do is actually akin to people who are doing the red light for their body, we're doing near infrared light for the brain. So it's transcranial.
Wow.
And if you can see the video, there's little nubs here, and these are the LED, the specialized LEDs that we use. But that is actually related to something else you mentioned, which was around inflammation, whether it's inflammation in the body, inflammation in the brain. And so near infrared light and transcranial photobiomodulation in particular has been shown in studies to reduce that inflammation in the brain.
Wow.
And that's why there's so much excitement around transcranial photobiomodulation for prevention and treatment of dementia. So that's why that's incorporated in our system. Yeah. It's a very powerful modality.
So that's just a total separate modality that just happens to be on the product itself. Wow.
That's right. It's boost, train, and assess. So if you're thinking of it like, exercise for the brain, the boost is like a primer. It is a bit like stretching, right? Where if the neurofeedback is more like lifting weights, right? And so what we're trying to do is make it so that people have that immediate effect. That's with the boost. So that's the transcranial photobiomodulation. And then we give them the actual, the hard work of the neurofeedback that will change their lives over time.
Super interesting. Wow. Congratulations. When did Sensei become available to people?
Only August of 2023. So we were in R&D for about 5 years.
Amazing.
Yeah, but we've already got thousands of people on the platform. And what's exciting about that is that now we're getting the testimonials. We're getting the feedback from real people that are not friends and family who are saying, wow, this really helped. And I'm using it and it's having this impact on my family and my work. And but because of that data set that we've collected, we found that we have a number of biomarkers that we're tracking with the EEG, with the ERPs that we mentioned, with the assessment, with the HRV that are tracking with age. So I know we both have a strong interest in longevity and health span. And so these different markers that track with age, it just from the top of our heads looking at it, it's like, wow, there's like over 35. We run it through AI, there's over 100, right? So it's a very significant data set for creating a biological brain age clock, which means that there's a biological brain age feature that we can now launch. And so we're launching that in collaboration with Buck Institute, which is one of the largest research groups in the US on longevity and aging. And we're launching that in the spring of next year. So we're just going to start doing pilots soon. And that'll be available through coaches. I know you have coaches, so that's why I mentioned it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Wait, and so is that where you're going to do brain age testing specifically?
That's right. Because it has to be part of a holistic view, right? You can't look at the brain in isolation. So you have to look at diet. You have to look at exercise.
I love it.
Yeah. So we have that puzzle piece that you can't get from blood-based testing. So, we have to look at the electrical activity of the brain, the way the brain is processing new information that we mentioned with the assessments, those sub 100 millisecond, sub 400 millisecond processes. We're giving that information, giving a rich, report to the clinician, the facilitator, and then giving them some training. So that's part of what's coming out next for us.
Incredible. So much good stuff coming. You've done such great work with this. I'm so super fascinated and impressed with everything you've done and are doing. And yeah, amazing. And we're so happy that you're able to share that all with us today. So last question for you. I already know something you do, which sounds like on a daily basis, but what do you do to live your most nutritious life on a daily basis?
Right, because we talked a bit about meditation. I do meditate in the mornings. It's definitely an important part of my routine. I would say as it relates to diet, besides the more obvious, looking at what, the sources of my food, that I'm not eating things that are processed or sugary, a gratitude practice brings me into the moment with the food and more connected with the whole, and more mindful as I eat, right? And I think that mindfulness is important, not just for appreciating the food and enjoying the food, but I think it keeps us more able to control our portions, actually.
Right.
I think.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's a density of the experience when you bring your mindfulness to it.
Oh, yeah. You're listening to your body, and you're slowing down, and you're hopefully stopping when you're slightly satisfied. You're also, if you're eating with other people, you're focused on the people as well and not just the food. So yeah, lots of reasons why being mindful can help there. I love that. Love that you're doing that. Thank you so much. As I mentioned, we're going to put links to Sens.ai in the show notes, and also, a link to where people can learn more about your fascinating career. And thank you so much for all the good work and all the good work you're putting out into the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, Keri.